Guys, hello, and welcome to another episode of Yaki Play. I, as always, am Sani Fahouri.
I'm Jad Yamin, and Sunny, based on my request today, we're gonna do Scythe.
Scythe!
As I told you guys in the outro of the last video, I have no idea what I'm doing 80% of the time when I'm playing this game.
It is a challenging game, if not visually appealing.
It is
right?
very pretty.
Yeah,
I mean, it's very pretty.
I can't tell you how many people pass by a Glare and go, man, this game is beautiful, how do I play it? And then I start teaching the rules, and they're like,
oh my god, yeah.
No.
I'm just gonna go play Splendor.
But no, there is a lot going on in this game, which makes it so great. But at the same time, there's many different things you can do, and this is the whole point of these videos. Just sort of maybe your group wants you to play this game with you, and you're like, how do I even? And you're not sure. So that's the whole point of these videos, to help you get a basic grasp of this game.
Yeah.
We're gonna assume that you know how to play the game already.
If it has just been explained to you recently.
Yes, that's right.
So the first thing that I found that I kind of forget, or that needs to be stressed upon, is that what is it that you need to do? What are the parameters in the game that you need to keep an eye on to make sure you're scoring a decent amount of points at the end of the game?
That's right. And before I answer that question, just the first things for a bit of logistics here. We're planning on doing 2 videos for this game. This one here is just going to be covering some basics, like what are you trying to do, what's your objectives, how are you going to try to do them. A second video will be focusing individually on factions and their starting position. These things have to be considered in tandem, but for now, just keep things general. We're playing as 2 factions, the Rus-Viet Union and the Crimean Khanate. But
Just a coincidence.
Just a total coincidence. We love you guys everywhere. All right, so let's get to that question. So what is this game about? This game is about stars.
Stars.
I said it, right? So while I have played games where the player who gets their 6th star does not win the game. There we go. So the stars. You do need to respect the fact that if you have 1 star and your opponent has 5 stars, you're not doing it.
That's parameter 1. That's your base parameter. Get as many stars out there as you can.
Parameter number 2 is controlling territory, right? And let's be clear. This is basically scoring parameters, right? During the game, you will not be focused so much on territory as you will towards the end of the game, and there is a judgment call to be made as to when you go and just spread your guys around to try to take as much territory as you can. But that is something you should keep in mind. But let's go back to stars, because stars is the big one, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think all of us, when we started playing the game, were told that there were, 10 different ways to get stars in this game, right? There's 10 different categories here. You can go for the military power, or the reputation, or for the building of the buildings, or the mechs, or the upgrades, or the whatever, recruits, right?
Recruits. Yeah, recruits.
Yeah, recruits. So there is a bit of that going on for sure. But how do you do it? How do you even approach these things? And that's the first real big strategy advice I want to offer for you. This game.
When you look at your board,
Yep.
how do you know how to build your engine? That's kind of like putting that your what you're gonna say into context.
Exactly. Sorry, try to say it right. Bottom actions. This game is all about bottom actions, right? So you can always do the top actions. You always have usually the money and the resources and the manpower to do them. But the bottom actions are the sexy actions, and these are how you win the game.
But right? How do you know which ones to do?
Right. Now, a couple of things, right? First of all bottom actions will give you a certain amount of coins based on completing them, right? The values range from 0 to 3. A winning strategy is typically to go for the ones that give you 2 or 3 coins, but sometimes you have to do a few of the one in the zeros as well, right? So that's usually a good starting point, because at the end of the game, money is also victory points.
Okay.
But now to answer your other question, which is which ones do you do?
Because there's a chain to them, right? You want to chain them so that you are always doing action upon action, and always getting you the bottom, always helping your engine, and always pushing you towards getting those stars, right?
That's right.
How do you do that?
How do you figure out which ones it is? So it comes down to one big realization that all bottom actions require resources, right? You will not do any bottom actions without the necessary resources.
Okay.
So that feeds into the idea of how do you get the resources. There are only two real actions for resources. Ignoring, moving, and finding exploration cards will give you the necessary resources, and that is
Trade and produce.
Trade and produce. These are the two main actions here. And depending on which column you find these two things, that will actually dictate how you can efficiently select the right actions. Let me show you an example of my board over here. So here for the Research Union, we can see trade and produce are in these two columns over here. And these happen to match the building a mech and also building a building. So naturally, through the course of play, you want to gravitate towards doing these ones because you always have a top action that can give you the necessary resources to then complete that bottom action. All right. Now, something to keep in mind in this game is that people ask, which bottom action should I do first? Should I upgrade to make my bottom actions more efficient in the future and my top ones more sexy? Should I do mechs so I can get better powers? Should I build a building to upgrade the top action? Should I recruit so that I can benefit off my neighbors? The big thing with this game is that all of these things improve your economy in some way. And the order that you do them is important, but not super important. It depends on the faction. This is why we save that for the faction video. But for sure, you need to keep in mind that the actions below the two main ones, the produce and trade, are the ones you want to focus on. All right. So
more often than not, newbies will find themselves locked into doing two actions, like moving from one, getting the bottom, and moving the other to the bottom, and they kind of ignore the other two.
That can be totally fine.
Well, it's not totally fine if you're not moving. If you're like doing stuff and you're just stuck around on your.
If you're stalling, then yeah, it could. Okay, I guess I can see that being an issue. But the big thing is every single bottom action is tied to a star, right? And you generally want to keep doing that action until you have that star, and then focus on something else. And I guess part of the advanced strategy of the game is wondering when you should interrupt this flow to do another top action of some sorts, right? Maybe you just need to move your hero to the factory or some other place. Maybe there's a tantalizing fight from a weak opponent that you want to take advantage of before something else happens. So yeah, sometimes you have to break things up. Sometimes you do. And of course, you can't produce until your workers are in position to do so. That is something that you have to move every now and then. And of course, bolstering, it's kind of one of the actions you don't do early on, but can be very important, especially if you care about the bottom action tied to that one over there. All right, so that's just some basics about how important trading and producing is, because that again gives you the resources you need to do the bottom actions you want to do. And the best part about trading and producing is that gets you resources, right? And when you do have to interrupt to do another action that is not tied to these two, hopefully you're getting the resources you need to be able to do that bottom action as well, right? So maybe in the chaining back and forth producing and trading, you're able to collect enough oil to do this bottom action. Okay. Then you can do something more with that, right?
So generally what you're saying is the first few turns, trade and produce, trade and produce, trade and produce.
Moving a bit as well. You got to get your workers into position. But yeah, that's kind of your
the essence of
the essence of the mid and I'd say part of the early game as well. Okay, let's talk a bit about workers and how to use them effectively, right? So I already praised on how great produce is, right? How to use it effectively. I think everyone looks at the workers beneath produce and they go, oh man, this stuff costs things to do. Right? I don't want to put too many workers up. Well, there's a fine balance. Now, there are strategies out there that work where you get all the workers out, which by the way is a star, so it would be good to do that at some point. But the cost of having more and more workers out is
kind of taxing. It's taxing, right?
The gold is not usually so bad. The military power turns out to also not be too horrible, but the popularity is a big deal, right? Popularity is so important in this game. You being on a higher tier than everyone else can be game winning, right? So as a result, you don't want to sacrifice your popularity too much. if you look carefully at the board, the optimal amount of workers to get out, if you're new and you have no idea what to do and you're not focusing on advanced strategies, is to get 3 extra workers out. Because at this point, you are only paying a single military power, and you're getting the full benefit of 5 extra workers when they're on the board, right? So that's kind of the key number of workers if you're new.
Breaking point, if you wish.
Yeah, it's a great breaking point, right? Now, at some point, because you're only 3 workers away, it would be nice to get the remaining 3 to get that star, but you don't want to have that be on you for the entire game, right?
Yeah.
You do want to build your popularity at some point and not have to worry about losing it when you have to produce those resources you need to do the bottom actions.
Racing for the encounters as well, I think, is kind of like, it's a sexy element of the game, and I think everybody wants to do it, and it's kind of like gives you a freebie.
That's right.
So
and the nice thing about encounters is that they give you a possibility to collect resources that are not otherwise available to you, right? Case in point, I know I was going to save this for the faction video, but looking at the Polania start over here, and looking at their starting conditions is also important when you're deciding which actions to do. You can see that they lack steel in the area, which means getting a mech is going to be hard for them to do. However, if they're lucky with their encounter, they might be able to get enough steel or get a mech to get them out of that problem. So that's why encounters are good. But even before we talk about that, I just want to talk a bit more about workers and like how you use them efficiently. So, you know, if most factions have a village they can easily access, like the Polonians is over here, the Germans is over here, the Khanates are over there, and of course the Soviet Union has some over there, and the Nords can quickly spread out to the adjacent villages. And that's usually a great starting point to get to the villages, because that is how you can pump out more workers, right?
make babies.
Make babies, that's right. That's always got to do it, right? So that's always a good starting point. Now, one problem people have is that when they start making all the workers, then you have the unfortunate, like, weird.
You need to move them around, and you can only move 2, right?
That's right. That's right.
I found myself in that position a couple of times, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Well, how do I move
bad? Yeah.
Like there's like I have to spend multiple actions. I'm allowing the bottom action, I'm not winning the game. That's where mechs come in. Mechs are extremely effective at moving their workers around. You should focus, if you can, on getting a mech out as soon as possible. Not as a combat option, not as for one of the bottom powers, although they're very nice, but just to be able to move your workers around, right? Having a mech move all the workers from one space to another is
dropping one along the way and then moving again.
Yeah, if you get the +1 speed, it is just fantastic. And one thing that many newbie players worry about, and which is something you should be worried about, is how to get off your starting island, right? All the factions in the base game are stuck to their 3 hex space of tiles that they can only exploit. You have to think about how to get out of there, and
it's usually one of your mechs has that.
Yeah, that's right. So many people think, okay, I'll get the. Everyone has a Riverwalk mech, at least for the core, the base game factions, or possibly like the Russian Union has some ability to teleport to the central factory. Right, you might take advantage of something like that. There's other options as well. You can always build a mine, although I personally think that's one of the weaker choices for 2 reasons. Number one, many times when you're building buildings, you want to keep the bonus in mind, and many of these bonuses don't allow for a mine to be placed in the suboptimal position. So you, like here, you want to place buildings on a mine location. So building a mine on a non-mine location means you're losing up points on that. So mine is sort of like a suboptimal way of doing that. But mechs are a great way to get yourself off the starting island. +1 speed cannot be understated. This is probably one of the most powerful mech abilities in the game, more so than moving off your starting island. Because, consider, if you just spend your first couple of turns getting the metal you need to build a mech, and you get the +1 speed, when you take a move action, you can move your hero directly from the starting point to the encounter. No need to do 2 move action back-to-backs. You just have a very efficient straight line towards an encounter. That's right.
Nice.
Okay, so that's the basics of resources and how, you know, why produce and trade are so valuable, because you can get the resources you need to do the bottom actions, as well as maybe building up towards the other ones. Mechs are good because you can help you move things around. Any other questions that you'd want to ask about for basics and what you'd like to focus on?
I mean, it's not a question, but it's something of an observation in terms of military strength in this game. It's definitely not a game where it's all about hoarding mechs and hoarding units. It's you have to be very opportunistic in the way that you are. You need to kind of steal those couple of wins to put the sword out. It's really not about having the most mechs. It's not about having the most the most military power on the bolster. You just need to have enough to be able to capitalize on the opponent that you want to target right then and there.
That's right. Something to keep in mind with fights is that the winner of the fight, be he the attacker or defender, gets a star, right? Unless you're already capped at 2, or you're playing as Germany, who can get infinite stars from that. You want to present yourself as a threat enough that people don't come after you, and that allows you to dictate when you want to fight other people and get the stars you need to close out the game as soon as possible.
Yeah.
In terms of military power, there's really 2 optimal modes. You either want to be at 16 to get the star, or you want to be more than 7, right? So that at least you can potentially fight that, right? If you're in the bottom area, you're going to present, you're going to be a weakling opportunity, right?
Yeah, you're going to get pounded on.
So, you know, when you're in the 13, 14 area over here, this is like a critical time where you don't want anyone to fight you because you're trying to get those last 2 power points to get that star. This is also actually one of the best times to attack other players because you know they're trying to get the star. They might not be willing to spend as much power, and that could be an easy star for you if you do that. Yeah. In terms of how much to spend when it comes to fights, I see too many people spend like 1 power and there's like, yeah, you can take this one. You really should fight for those stars. You really should. So many people take advantage of that. You know, he doesn't want to fight. He's just spend 1 or 2 stars, one or 2 power. I'm just gonna, you know, spend 3 and win that fight, right? No, you should make them pay for it, because if they mess up, that's a star for you. That's 1/6 of your victory condition, right? Don't give up fights too easy, unless you have nothing, in which case there's not much you can do. Also, don't forget the rule that if you spend at least 1 power, you get another comeback card, which is nice. Could improve your odds of getting a better one out.
So if you're the weaker opponent on the table, do you just go all out, put your best card in, put all of your military strength in, and maybe assume that the next guy was gonna just like try to go soft and not put enough to match or exceed your maximum,
right?
And then probably steal a win. That's what you want to do.
It really does depend. So something to keep in mind is that if you go all out, then obviously you're going to be bust next turn. But you should always take a minute and do an actual calculation of how much your opponent could put in, right?
Yeah.
It's always going to be up to 7, depending on how much power they have. Plus, you can assume the worst case scenario of them having a 5 for every single card. And attackers always win ties, so you know, if you have, say, a case of 1 mech fighting a hero in the middle, and let's say you're at 5 and I'm over here, the most you could possibly put in is 10. 5 for your combat power, and then 5 from your card. So, you know, maybe I'll commit to 11 to beat that out, right? But some people will think of mind games like, oh, maybe you put
saying
2.
If I'm on the weaker end here, like, okay, I know you know the maximum I can put in is 10. But do I put in the 10, or do I try to go a little bit less so that I save power for the next fight? Because you're saying don't give up the fight too easy, right?
Yeah.
But the difference in strength here is big enough to maybe warrant me saying I'm just not gonna go there. I'm gonna spend 1 star or 0 stars and
okay. Let's look at the situation. Let's suppose we have a third-party player, you know, Germany, who's like eyeing this territory, and let's suppose I'm just gonna assume this is Germany still. He's like all the way out here, so he's kind of a friend. And let's say you're the yellow player and you're like falling behind, right? Okay, you have a fight with me. I'm gonna come kick your ass, right? So we have a thing. I'm clearly stronger than you. For me, I'm thinking, you're kind of weak. Maybe I'll just throw in a bit of like 3 or 4. Maybe I'd be thinking, no, maybe you're a threat. Maybe I'll make sure I put 11 in. But you're not sure. Either way, if I put less than you, you get a star out of it. I get sent home, you have nothing, but you are still there and someone else can come in and take you out, and effectively you're still knocked back.
Yeah.
But you still got a star out of it, right? However, if this was the case and you spent nothing, I get a star, and then when he comes to fight me, he gets a star, you're basically losing a star. You should commit, no matter what, because you could get a star. And stars are how you win this game.
Cool.
That's right. Of course, you might know your friends better than we know your friends, because some people will have certain metas. They might think, oh, I'm just going to put 1 in and see how it goes. Maybe you have a very conservative person who just doesn't like fighting. That's something to take advantage of. You really have to read the situation, but for me, I've just noticed that people put not enough power to fights. Like I see someone who's clearly winning put 3, and I'm like, how did you only put 3? How did you only put 1? What? That could have been an easy start for you.
Yeah.
Now, if you're certainly down here, then spend it all. But if you're close, then you might want to hold that, as I mentioned before.
How important is capturing the factory?
Capturing the factory. Okay. The factory is kind of overrated. Many people think, oh, you can, like with the factory cards, you can move twice, and you can do certain actions you can't, which is nice. But the big thing to consider is that you miss out on the coins you make from certain bottom actions. Now, if you go to the factory and there's an action you can take which is not something that gives you money, like for example, let's find a slightly better example. Let's say we have this one. Well, this is really bad. But let's say this one, for example, right? Here, you get nothing for building mechs. So here, for the low cost of popularity, which is actually not very low, you can build a mech. So it's not bad. It's a good way to supplant a bottom action that you wouldn't normally be able to take. The double move action is nice. It allows you to engage fights, but you have to consider the fact that you only ever move 1 unit with that action. So you're going to a fight with only 1 dude, which means you can only put him 1 single card. Not great. It's always good to be able to put more cards to get a higher advantage that way. So I would say the factory is nice, but don't go out of your way taking it, especially not early on. Remember the
if you can get one of your secret objectives by going there,
of course, then you should totally do that.
But if it's not part of your grand scheme of putting stars down, I think it might be just avoided completely.
That's right. I remember
because sometimes in some games people are like really fighting for it, right?
Yeah, and that could be painful. I mean, you can get a lot of stars that way, but unless you're Germany, only up to 2. So at some point, it's going to become not to your advantage to fight anymore because you got your 2 stars. And remember, every action you're moving is an action where you're not producing or trading to get the goods. You need to do the bottom actions. So keep that in mind. As to secret objectives, you should try doing one of them, of course, because that's a star. But don't be afraid to throw them away if they're completely against the gist of your faction, right? Like here, this one says, have a factory card, at least 1 mech, and no more than 3 workers. You really have to put your economy on hold to only have 3 workers for a while, and that can really slow you down. But it's a start, so it depends. This might be good on a fewer player board, because if there's not as many players, it's not as likely to have fights in the middle, so maybe you can go for that. But there are some cards that encourage stockpiling resources like this one. This can be really, really good for trying to...
this one says monopolize the market.
Yeah, control at least 9 tokens of the same resource at the end of your turn. Yeah, if you can just get all your guys on metal and just metal, you can get a very easy start.
And some of them play to the natural ability of
certain factions. That's right. We'll certainly,
like for example, the Crimeans. The Crimeans try to hoard the combat cards, and this says have 8 or more combat cards in hand, and at least 1 combat victory star. So
that's right.
That kind of plays to the Crimean advantage.
Kind of play, although it discourages you from spending them until you have enough.
Yeah.
That's
you are kind of gonna be wanting to hoard as many combat cards as you can, get as many as the 5 at the start, and then go out and try to
That's right.
engage.
Absolutely right. Yeah. So I mentioned starting territory is very important, because the better you're starting territory, the less moves you have to make to get your workers in position to produce. That's more going to be in the faction video. And, it's going to be 5 separate factions. We'll also make recommendations for good gold cards to keep for these factions and which ones to watch out for. Additionally, we're going to be focusing on the mech abilities in that video as well. That can be very important, and trying to focus on what mechs you should get out first. This is always great. So
again, to recap, try to trade and produce as much as you can at the start of the game, while unlocking the bottom actions as well.
That's right.
But then as you move forward, you want to try to move and bolster as well to try to get those stars and be ready to combat. Keep in mind that you're probably gonna get your 2 fights in, probably. You're gonna get one of the economy things at least, or maybe possibly 2. Definitely the 4 mechs.
It depends on your starting resources, but totally. I guess just a few more things, like immediate tips to help you out. Bolstering, right? Spending $1 for 2 military power, not so great. Spending $1 to get 3 military power though is amazing.
Really good.
Because that really rockets you up.
This is really something that you need to upgrade before you.
So I would say, like, in terms of upgrades, the first upgrade you should always do
Is the bolster?
is either actually the bolster or the move. People say produce because I can produce more. If you're doing a good job, you want your workers to be in a certain space, like 2 spaces, and so getting the third one doesn't really help so much. But bolster and move is very nice. And which one you cover on the bottom depends on what you're trying to go for. You can make the bottom actions beneath these 2 cheaper, which is always good. But yeah, those are the 2.
I think you probably want to make whatever you're doing on your trade and produce columns cheaper.
That's right. That's always a good goal. In terms of buildings, which one you build first is kind of up to you. If you're still stuck on your starting island, the mine is fine, I guess. Otherwise, the armory is great because it's below action, which you should be doing reasonably, which is trade, and that gives you more military power. It's very nice. On the other hand, if you do finally get the upgrade for the bolster, also unlocking the monument makes you gain popularity as well. And this is one of the few ways you can reliably gain popularity. So that's really good. I want to boost out that action before you start taking it so many times. In terms of recruiting, the best one you always start with, especially with the Kremlin Khanate, is the one that gives you bonus cards. Because if you're planning on doing more of this stuff, you're just going to get more bonus cards with more combat cards, which is great. Beyond that, look at your opponents and see what they're going for, because you take advantage of what they do as well. If you see someone stockpiling all the wood, by all means unlock the house so you can get some popularity out of it. Totes my goats. Totes my goats. Alright.
Is there a natural way to, like, if you're playing this for the first time, like, what would be the things that the natural factions, the factions go naturally for? Like, if you find yourself next to the Germans and the Polish, what do you do?
I would say probably one of the hardest factions to play as early on is the Germans, precisely because you need a game plan for missions or fighting. And that could be really hard to pull off as a new player because you're like, how do I fight? What are all these crazy dials? Do I put the card in so they know if I have the card or not? You know, things like that. One of the easier ones I would have to say is the Rus Fiat Union, because of that flexibility of, oh, did you mess up and need to do a second action the second time? Well, they can let you do it again. So no need to worry about that. Second easiest would have to be, I think it's a tough call. It's between the Crimean Khanate and I think the Nords.
Scandinavians.
The Scandinavians. Yeah. Actually, no, the Scandinavians are kind of hard. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. The Polonians are nice because they get an extra thing from the counter cards, but they'll only be able to get like a few, maybe 2 or 3 in the game.
What I was trying to ask actually is, like, if you are, if let's say the Germans on your right and say the Polish on your left, is there something in order to unlock these enlists? Like, do you know that the Germans are going to go for this bottom action? For this action, so I need to unlock this bottom action.
Great question. Starting resources, right? That's a really big thing. So if the Germans are over there, they're going to be either upgrading or building mechs. So you know that's most likely what they're going to do. If you're playing with the Polonia, they're probably going to be recruiting or building buildings, right? So that's a possibility too. Of course, be careful. Trade is a very flexible ability. You can take resources of any type. So maybe Polonia will get metal so they can build a mech, and that can be an indication that, okay, maybe I should invest in the recruit for the building of the mechs. That's a possibility. Yeah. All right. So that is the basics of that. Yeah. Any other questions?
In terms of the base factions, no. I played this game a couple of times with the expansion factions, and that was kind of a whole different ball game. We'll keep that for a future video.
If you are new and your team and your group is playing with the expansion factions, do not pick one. They are really hard to wrap your head around. Even I haven't completely figured that out. So don't do it.
Kind of really slow to get moving. The movement's really...
Yeah, that's their biggest disadvantage, and it's a huge deal. Like, they only move one space at a time, and you can feel it. You can really feel it. Yeah, that's for sure. Okay.
So that's it for the intro strategies for Scythe.
Thank you so much for listening to me babble on for like half an hour.
No, I mean, for me, it was kind of very helpful. I think the next one will be more helpful for me with the when we go into the individual boards and the programming on those boards.
That's right.
I hope this was a good video for those of you who have played this a couple of times and were like, oh my god, what the fuck am I doing?
That's right.
And so hopefully get a couple of games in. watch the next video, which will be up very soon, and maybe then we also will have elevated your game to another level.
That's right. That's what we're trying to do here. Elevate all your gameplay to a high level. All right, guys. Thank you all so much.
So Sani Fakhouri, Jad Yamin from Dubai.
Yahi Play.
Bye-bye.
Like, comment, subscribe, or not. You know,
not.
You're all adults. You can take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, ciao guys.
Ciao.
Bye.